Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review of Iron Man 2020 Issue 6. And this is the conclusion to the whole Iron Man 2020 storyline with Arno Stark and the Extinction Level Entity event. And it was a good conclusion. It brought the storyline to a nice end, wrapped up some things, and set us off to the kind of new status quo that will be seen with the next creative team that kind of picks up. So we start off and everybody's like, oh god, there's that extinction level entity that Arno was talking about. It's like, yeah, see? And of course we get some things going on. Tony's like, oh god, I'm sorry, I understand what you were trying to do. Is Tony's saying this to Arno. He's like, let me help you out. And uses his armor to help fix Arno's armor and does a really awesome kind of cool job for it. There's a little bit of like some changes to what it looked like than what it normally was, but it was kind of nice to kind of see that. And of course Arno then starts apologizing. He's like, listen, I can't do this by myself. That's why I needed the humans and the robots to join forces for this, but forcing that was wrong of me and I'm sorry, but if you could please help me out now, I need that help. I was like, that was a kind of big thing for Arno. I'm glad that he kind of got through to that. So then the entity kind of blasts through the space station and they start fighting it. We lose Herbie, Awesome Andy, Machine Smith, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna have to fight this. We don't have the kind of firepower that I wanted to have, but we're just gonna have to kind of do this. And they pretty much start pushing it into the atmosphere to kind of like discombobulate it for at least a little bit. While Tony's like, yeah, we kind of have some people. How's that coming along, Friday? He's like, no RSVPs, but we got some people doing stuff on the ground. And then we shift and we see that the Avengers are fighting them. We see Thor in his new getup that we've seen with his newest run. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of the time frame. That's kind of cool to see. We see the Iron Legion fighting. We see Madam Menace / Sunset Bane doing some stuff. And usual kind of ground forces. The people that we've been usually kind of seen throughout the series at this point. And then they start getting kind of like messed up by the tentacles being driven in by the entity. And Arnold's like, those aren't really big guns. They won't really affect him for too long. He's like, no, those aren't the big guns. And we switch over and we see kind of hulked out kind of controller being controlled by Bethany. We see her, I think, in another kind of mech thing as Andy is in his giant kind of iron mech. That was pretty cool. And they're kind of containing it at the moment. But then we see that Arnold's like, okay, Tony, I gotta do this myself. Blast him away. And he's like, yeah, the God Killer wasn't the armor. It was me. Pretty much perfecting myself into a poison pill as he's getting kind of consumed by the entity. And talking about how he was more AI at heart. But yet he still had the frailties of like human ego and being born frail. As the entity, as he's consuming him, blows up, we see that Tony catches him and is like, yeah, don't worry, man, I forgive you. And then we shift out and we see that none of that happened. That Tony had used his holographic armor to pretty much put him in another kind of thing similar to his Iron Lung and / the Escape. So he's in a virtual reality thing showing that he's like a hero and being praised by everybody and that he did a good job and he's made amends for everything that's been going on. And Tony then lays down that Arno was never cured of his disease. That what they had done had just abated it and pretty much held it off, almost like a reoccurrence. And that it would have eaten his brain and killed him by the end of 2020. So to stop that from happening, Tony and Friday pretty much made this whole escape thing to keep him alive. Of course, his digitized parents are like, that's inhumane and that's wrong. But he's like, what else? What other choices do I have? Granted, he really didn't have that many since he was trying to kind of enslave everything going on. Like humans, robots, and we had seen that he and Friday had did that whole thing in the Stark space station. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And he explained that they had to feed in his delusion to kind of get him trapped so that way they could kind of sort this whole thing out. And he's like, yeah, this isn't going to work that well because he's in there by himself and he'll figure it out eventually. Because Friday can only do so much. We're going to need other people in there kind of guiding it, you guys. And you can have the family that you all should have had. And they, of course, go off to do that. It's like, well, that sucks. because I'm usually a proponent of the truth, because if you do those kind of things, it kind of leads to some weird kind of repercussions down the line. We'll have to see how Arno kind of feels with that going later on, if he gets brought back out, if they're able to cure him. We'll have to see about that. So, that was an interesting place to end that. We then find the fallouts of other kind of various portions of the stories going forward. We see that Madame Menace's Sunset Bane pretty much takes responsibility for all the crazy insanity that was ensuing, and that she's pretty much being forced to by Yocasta. And Aaron's like, hey, isn't that kind of unethical? And she's like, well, Sunset Bane kind of sucked and kind of deserves it. And they're together, and that's pretty much where that portion ends out. We switch over, and we see that Rhodey has now been fixed as well, because evidently he had problems introduced with the resurrection process as well. So they had to get his relative's DNA, and that the problems in that kind of process had gotten his whole phobia of being inside suits of armor. So that is now fixed. I'm glad, because it's like, alright, that would have been kind of weird that he's pretty much War Machine, and he's going to be kind of always afraid of being in armor. I understand with what he went through, but it's like, okay, have to see how that kind of shakes out. We also get some dialogue of, like, Carol being like, hey, so I'm off the hook for killing you? It's like, you did technically kill me, but it didn't stick, so yeah, we're kind of even. We're good. And I was like, okay, good to kind of get that kind of stuff out of the way. The last portion we get to, we see that Tony has now gotten into kind of an older suit of armor. He's like, yeah, let's take this for a spin. Friday, you want to join me? And she's like, I'm not your mother, not your co-pilot. I'm going to go for Robo Karaoke. I'm like, you do you. And then Andy's like, yeah, what are we going to do about Stark Unlimited? He's like, all this stuff, that's kind of screwed over. So here you go. I put the company in your name. Here you go. It's all got you. You do you, man. It's like, oh, wow, me? I'm going to be the Iron Man of the future. And then he blasts off. And that's where the issue ends. And I'm like, okay, that was pretty cool. I'm glad that Andy got that in the end, and I want to hopefully see more of Andy in the future, because it's going to be interesting to see what other kind of creative teams will do with his company and what they'll kind of do with him as a character, because I thought he was always kind of an interesting kind of addition, and I think it was pretty cool that they gave him the company like that while setting Tony into a better kind of space for the springboarding to the next creative team. So I really enjoyed this issue. I really enjoyed this run, and I can't wait to see what they do in the next creative team. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day. And Wakanda forever.